The vast majority of individuals don't actually process their own thoughts. Pause and examine your personal convictions for a moment. The morals you uphold, the opinions you defend, your perspective on society. How many of these concepts did you genuinely construct yourself, and how many were simply handed to you? Long before you possessed the ability to challenge anything, your caretakers molded your mindset. Your surroundings dictated what is acceptable, and your peers underwent that exact same conditioning. Therefore, the bulk of your convictions didn't emerge from profound contemplation. They were merely absorbed through proximity. Today, you possess firm stances and believe you grasp how reality operates. But if you look in the mirror, how much of that worldview have you actively verified? Did you interrogate it, or did you just adopt it because it was the path of least resistance? The harsh reality is that forming your own conclusions demands a heavy toll. It requires intense labor, breeds uncertainty, and frequently alienates you from your peers. That is precisely why the masses dodge it. You witness it constantly. An influential figure speaks, and the masses echo it immediately. A concept trends, and the public embraces it without grasping its core. The collective dictates what is moral, and everyone falls in line because disagreeing equates to isolation. People crave security and inclusion over standing alone. They desperately want to be on the correct side, but feeling secure and finding the truth are entirely different things. So, pose a basic question to yourself. Do your thoughts actually belong to you? I'm not talking about the concepts you absorbed because they were trending, or the viewpoints you swallowed just to fit in. I mean the epiphanies you unlocked through direct encounters, sharp awareness, and raw, unfiltered logic. If you're hesitating right now, that is perfectly okay. That tiny spark of skepticism, that quiet realization of I might not actually know that, is where genuine intellect awakens. And that is the exact focus of today's breakdown. I will reveal why true independent logic is incredibly scarce, why the majority exist completely trapped within borrowed concepts, and why mastering the art of mental and strategic solitude is mandatory for acquiring true leverage. But I won't sugarcoat the price. This journey is rarely pleasant. It will often feel incredibly lonely and unpredictable. The masses run from this, but if you refuse to confront it, you will remain trapped in a psychological cage that you never built. This is not a hype speech. This is about achieving total vision. If you are genuinely committed to this path, type this exact phrase in the comments: "My mind belongs to me." Now, let's dive into it. Point number 1. The stark contrast between autonomous logic and blind faith. We need to address the most crucial distinction, which is constantly misunderstood. A massive canyon exists between actually processing your own thoughts and simply blindly trusting a narrative you were fed. From a surface perspective, they can appear identical. Two individuals might express the exact same stance, but one arrived there by ruthlessly interrogating and validating the idea. The other simply absorbed it from their social circle and clung to it because it offered peace of mind. They use identical vocabulary, but the structural integrity is completely different. Operating on blind faith is intoxicating. It delivers instant solutions during chaotic times and grants you immediate community inclusion. Aligning with your tribe's dogma generates a potent feeling of security, and that comfort is entirely valid. But there is a hidden tax. Blind allegiance quietly deteriorates your mental resilience because your foundation is borrowed. The second the real world pushes back, or contradictory data emerges, or someone demands an explanation you can't provide, your entire framework trembles. This happens not necessarily because the idea itself is flawed, but because you possess zero understanding of the mechanics behind it. Autonomous logic operates differently. It offers zero emotional warmth. Instead, it delivers absolute precision. Gaining that precision demands serious grit. It requires the courage to admit, I might be completely incorrect. You must interrogate your most treasured assumptions with the same ruthless skepticism you would apply to a random stranger's claims. Most find this excruciating because their opinions aren't just passing thoughts. They have become fused with their ego. When a counterargument arises, they don't view it as a rational debate. They interpret it as an attack on their soul. Rather than analyzing the data, they put up walls, deflect the topic, attack the messenger, or double down on their dogma. You observe this behavior constantly in corporate environments, pop culture, and even at the dinner table. It's not a lack of intelligence, it's the dangerous fusion of identity and opinion. Therefore, discovering you are incorrect feels less like a software update and more like a physical amputation. If your goal is true intellectual autonomy, you must violently sever that connection. Your identity is separate from your current hypotheses. Your stances are merely your latest estimations of reality. They can and absolutely must evolve the moment superior data presents itself. That isn't a flaw. That is an upgrade. Historically, consensus has never been a reliable indicator of reality. For centuries, massive populations have fiercely defended completely inaccurate models of the universe, human nature, and societal mechanics. A confident majority does not manifest reality. Factual accuracy stems from the few who pause and wonder, does this actually add up? Let me verify this independently. Prioritizing raw data over emotional warmth is the bedrock of sovereign thought. It remains incredibly scarce, not due to a lack of brainpower, but because it requires enduring what most flee from, the capacity to sit with uncertainty, the openness to heavy scrutiny, and the relentless drive to uncover facts regardless. If you are ready to forge this mental armor, drop this phrase down below: truth over comfort, always. Moving on to number 2. Why the solitary path feels so punishing. If generating your own logic is so incredibly powerful, why is the crowd still so massive? Because the process is brutal, and you must grasp this reality now, or it will blindside you and make you think you are broken. Let's break down the primary hurdles. The initial shock is isolation. The moment you cease blindly nodding along to the established narrative, your peers will sense the shift. You halt your automatic compliance. You pose inquiries they desperately wish to dodge. You point out discrepancies they refuse to acknowledge. Gradually, the atmosphere changes. You no longer slot perfectly into the social puzzle. Dialogues become slightly awkward, and certain individuals grow visibly tense in your presence. They might not actively banish you, but a noticeable void forms. Group chats quiet down, the vibe shifts, and suddenly you recognize you are lingering on the perimeter of circles you used to anchor. You committed no crime. You merely ceased echoing the hive mind. That subtle, unspoken exile can wreck your mental state. Because your character didn't degrade, your perception simply leveled up, and you are paying the price for it. The subsequent hurdle is internal skepticism. When a massive demographic aligns on a concept, your neurology interprets that as a survival signal. It screams, millions of people cannot possibly be mistaken. So, when you construct a contradictory thesis all by yourself, the internal critic awakens. Am I completely off base here? Are they actually correct and I'm just spiraling? What critical detail am I blind to? To be completely transparent, that internal voice has a point: you might actually be incorrect. Thinking for yourself doesn't magically guarantee accuracy. It simply means you are actively analyzing rather than blindly pasting. But the massive shift is that the safety net of the collective is gone. You must completely lean on your personal discernment. You are forced to carry your hypotheses without seeking a constant stream of external applause. That demands immense psychological grounding, which isn't constructed in a day. The third barrier is strictly biological. Our species is programmed to seek community, not merely for warm feelings, but because in ancient times, it ensured survival. Group inclusion equaled life. Banishment equaled death. Your nervous system still operates on that primal code. Whenever you defy the collective or dare to stand out, your body fires off stress signals, sometimes escalating to pure panic. It desperately tries to force you back into submission, to blend into the scenery. That biological reflex is not a character flaw, it's your hardwiring. However, it transforms into a massive liability when it dictates your intellect. So yes, this trajectory is highly uncomfortable. It breeds solitude, triggers heavy self-interrogation, and applies relentless psychological gravity, pulling you back to conformity. Anyone preaching that this journey is pure sunshine is completely ignoring the agonizing phases. But here is the secret most influencers ignore. That exact agony is the birthplace of absolute clarity. Once you strip away the static, stop contorting your personality to please the masses, and abandon the need to fulfill external demands, the true sound of your own intellect finally emerges. Not the avatar sculpted by society, not the chameleon that changes colors for different friend groups, just your raw, uncompromised logic. The vast majority never unlock this stage, not due to a lack of capability, but because they absolutely refuse to endure the agonizing silence required to find it. The herd offers a warm blanket, but mental solitude grants you a sniper's vision. Concept number 3. Forging wisdom through the fire of experience. Let me make one thing crystal clear. You cannot simply brainstorm your way into profound comprehension. You must physically walk through the fire. Authentic insight, the kind that permanently alters your DNA, dictates your daily navigation, and remains unbreakable when everything goes wrong, is exclusively purchased through raw, first-hand collision with reality. It cannot be downloaded from a guru, nor can it be constructed by binge-watching the perfect playlist of podcasts. It is strictly forged in the furnace of your own messy, chaotic, and brutal life events. This is the ultimate pitfall for highly intelligent individuals. They consume libraries of data, track brilliant minds, stockpile philosophies, and trick themselves into believing they have mastered arenas they haven't even stepped foot in. They can articulate magnificent lectures on adversity, grief, extreme focus, and bravery, yet they have never looked any of those demons in the eye. That rented intellect is incredibly brittle. It sounds incredibly sophisticated and provides a phantom sense of power, but the nanosecond real-world chaos applies crushing force. It shatters. Untested knowledge is merely raw data dressing up as hard-earned wisdom. You could study every single manuscript ever published on the topic of defeat. You could memorize every psychological framework explaining the utility of hitting rock bottom and how to extract the lesson. But until you have actually plummeted and failed at something that completely crushed your soul, until you have endured that suffocating pressure in your lungs, sat in the deafening silence of total ruin, and faced the agonizing reality of how on earth do I recover from this? You do not comprehend failure. You only know the definition of it, and those are two drastically different universes. A mentor's story, no matter how profoundly articulated, can never act as a stand-in for your own scars. It can prime your mind, hand you a strategic blueprint, and help you label the chaos once you are in it, but it cannot simulate the physical blow. This is exactly why individuals who have survived actual trenches, severe grief, monumental collapse, massive gambles, radiate a distinct aura. They carry a profound stillness and speak with an undeniable density. It isn't ego, it is wisdom, paid for, in full. Their worldview was forged on solid rock. Your personal history is your ultimate bedrock. No one can hand it to you, no one can steal it, and zero amount of rented knowledge will ever serve as a replacement. Right now, I need you to type this truth in the comments. Experience is my real teacher. Moving to number 4. The absolute equilibrium of sovereign minds. Whenever two truly autonomous thinkers engage in dialogue, a completely unique phenomenon occurs. It looks entirely different from the standard dynamic between a shepherd and a sheep, or two sheep echoing each other. In this space, the hierarchy vanishes. There is no dominant force, and no submissive echo. Neither party bows down out of reflexive insecurity, and neither projects a fake aura of superiority just to attract someone looking to rent an opinion. Both humans are operating from a heavily fortified foundation, built upon deductions they sweat blood to finalize. Consequently, the dialogue transforms into a high-level sparring match. Concepts are aggressively stress-tested, dismantled, and examined from a dozen angles. Both individuals leave the arena with a much deadlier mental arsenal, not because they sang the same tune, but because they relentlessly hammered away at each other's logical blind spots and demanded supreme rationality. That caliber of discourse is exceptionally scarce, and it can only manifest when both players actually hold the deed to their own minds, rather than subletting their thoughts. When someone lacking an internal compass encounters a highly assertive figure with a rigid philosophy, they immediately cling to them. They aren't running diagnostics on the actual logic. They are simply exhausted from uncertainty and thrilled to find a savior who projects absolute authority. They swallow the doctrine entirely. They parrot the exact phrasing, and they aggressively shield the dogma. But if you press them for the underlying mechanics, their only defense is because the expert declared it, or because the tribe agrees. At that exact moment, their intellect becomes the property of another human. Their entire reality is merely a projection, leaving them totally vulnerable to being steered, weaponized, or shattered by the exact entity that installed the programming. The figurehead in this equation doesn't even need evil intentions for this to become highly toxic. The subordinate has simply surrendered the one asset they must guard with their life. As an autonomous thinker, you never blindly bow to a piece of paper, social rank, or magnetic charm. You absorb the data, you weigh it heavily, and then you force it through your own rigorous lie detector. Does this actually translate to reality? Does it align with my real-world data collection? Does it yield functional results when deployed in the field? Does this speaker actually grasp the molecular structure of their claim, or are they just delivering it with excellent vocal tonality? That isn't being combative. That is the definition of intellectual sovereignty. And paradoxically, viciously challenging someone's thesis is the ultimate form of respect. Nodding mindlessly is just cognitive apathy, masquerading as politeness. A collision between two free minds is the purest form of equality because neither possesses the other's operating system. Both are totally authentic, entirely present, and the resulting synergy is a masterpiece that neither could have engineered in isolation, because it is the offspring of two distinct, unvarnished collisions with the real world. Insight number 5. The Machiavellian advantage of tactical sovereignty. Individuals who control their own logic are inherently resistant to manipulation, and that friction creates massive headaches for any entity or algorithm designed to farm predictable human reactions. Here is the slightly sinister reality. The vast majority of societal architecture is subtly engineered to crush deep, sovereign thought, not through aggressive dictatorships or blatant silencing, but through invisible dopamine levers and feedback loops deeply embedded into the academic system, the digital landscape, and everyday social politics. Examine the blueprint of traditional schooling. You are handed a packet of data, and your value is measured by your capacity to regurgitate that exact data in the pre-approved format. The genius response, the one that secures the highest marks, is the heavily anticipated response. A scholar who engineers an alternative angle, even if it is objectively superior, will encounter immediate resistance. The machine is not designed to celebrate intellectual rebellion. It is optimized to mass-produce compliance with standard operating procedures. Next, analyze the algorithms governing your digital life. The sole objective of these platforms is to maximize your screen time, and the most potent fuel for that is echo chamber validation. Content that perfectly mirrors your pre-existing biases triggers a massive dopamine spike and goes viral, while data that aggressively disrupts your worldview gets buried. Now, look at the tribal mechanics of your friend groups. Conformity is warm, it dispenses instant validation and guarantees your seat at the table. Voicing dissent, even with impeccable logic and a calm demeanor, is a massive social gamble. Consequently, the masses silently rewrite their own code. They allow their perspectives to slowly morph into the group consensus because the penalty for thinking differently is terrifying, while the prize for originality seems virtually non-existent. Layer upon invisible layer, these systems place a fence around human intellect. It isn't some grand, shadowy conspiracy. It's just the natural byproduct of systems prioritizing mass stability and friction-free operation. Genuine curiosity is an absolute threat to that stability. So, the moment you decide to claim ownership of your mind, a massive shift occurs. You become a highly unpredictable variable. You completely short-circuit the standard buttons. Tactics designed to trigger panic bounce off your armor because you start dissecting the threat instead of sprinting away from it. Social blackmail loses its venom because you are analyzing the mathematical weight of the idea, completely detached from the social credit score assigned to it. Manufactured hysteria fails to rush you because your default setting has become silent observation prior to execution. Any entity attempting to steer the masses heavily depends on predictable software. They need to know which psychological levers guarantee a reaction. But when your logic is entirely customized, when you have meticulously engineered your own ethical framework and physical understanding of the universe, those standard levers completely break off in their hands. Your next move becomes impossible for the machine to forecast. Here is the golden tactical rule. Every rented worldview acts as a cage around your potential. Every unquestioned narrative is a glaring security flaw. Every concept you swallowed without running a stress test leaves a backdoor wide open for external hijacking. The more you detach from the collective hallucination, the less traction the matrix has on your trajectory. This applies to extreme crises, but also to mundane daily operations. It dictates how you handle a crisis, how you negotiate a dispute, and whether you remain chained to a toxic partner, a dead-end career, or a hollow ideology simply because it is comfortable and requires less calories than burning it to the ground and starting over. True sovereignty is not being a loud rebel. It is not adopting a contrarian persona just to be edgy, nor is it refusing to collaborate. Those behaviors are just reactive programming. You are still letting the enemy dictate your stance. Authentic mental freedom is a state of terrifying calmness. You know precisely your coordinates and why you occupy them. You can absorb incoming data without being brainwashed. You can enter the arena without forfeiting your soul, and you cannot be bullied off your spot by whoever is screaming the loudest or throwing the longest tantrum. That is pure, unadulterated leverage. Not the fragile power of subjugating others, but the absolute invincibility of being impossible to drag into the abyss. Leave this declaration in the comments right now. My mind is not for sale. Strategy number 6. The practical blueprint for reclaiming your intellect. We are done with the philosophy. It is time for the tactical execution. Memorizing the value of this mindset won't magically grant it to you. You must get your hands dirty and grind this out daily. Here is the exact protocol. Phase 1. Interrogate your autopilot convictions. Isolate one major stance you fiercely defend. A moral baseline, a political viewpoint, a rigid assumption about society. Now, Put a gun to your own head and ask, how did this get installed? Did I forge this through sweat and deep analysis? Or did I just breathe it in from my surroundings? Can I actually back this up with cold, hard metrics and bulletproof logic? Or am I merely screaming it confidently because everyone in my echo chamber is screaming it alongside me? The objective isn't to destruct your entire identity just for fun. The goal is to separate the load-bearing pillars you actually constructed from the cheap scaffolding you blindly inherited. The principles that survive the firing squad become indestructible. The ones that shatter deserve to be destroyed. Phase 2. Enforce a micropause before echoing the mob. The next instance you catch your entire circle nodding in unison, establishing the exact same judgment or emotional reaction, fight the overwhelming urge to jump on the bandwagon. Just freeze for 1 single second. Ask yourself, is this objectively accurate? Or does it just feel warm and cozy because the whole room is chanting it? Am I actively calculating right now, or am I just acting out a script to secure my social standing? That 1 second delay is microscopic, but it forcefully uncouples the trigger from the reaction. That tiny void is the exact birthplace of sovereignty. Mass consensus never guarantees factual reality. Look at any history book to confirm that. The prevailing narrative is simply the one with the lowest social penalty, rarely the most accurate one. Phase 3. Enforce absolute, unfiltered isolation with your own brain. No TikTok, no podcasts, no background noise. Just raw, agonizing silence. This sounds incredibly basic, yet almost nobody accomplishes it. The average human can endure roughly 30 seconds of their own internal monologue before panicking and lunging for a screen. That is by design. The digital matrix is meticulously crafted to be far more intoxicating than self-reflection. But perpetual consumption traps you in a reactive loop. Your internal voice is permanently hijacked, merely reacting to whatever shiny object the algorithm shoved in your face. Absolute silence, devoid of any external mission, is the only environment where your genuine frequencies begin to broadcast. You finally distinguish what you genuinely believe from the programming you were brainwashed to repeat. Inject just 20 minutes of this into your daily routine. The compound interest is massive. Phase 4. Deploy your hypotheses into the physical arena. Do not just philosophize in your basement and declare victory. Drag that newly formed theory out into the unforgiving streets and watch if it survives contact with the enemy. Reality is the ultimate lie detector. Take your grand philosophies on human nature, the blueprint for dominance, or the laws of momentum, and actually execute them. Take action. Watch closely when the universe violently rejects your hypothesis. Do not fabricate a pathetic excuse to protect your fragile ego. Allow the theory to take the beating. Rebuild the engine. Your mental models must be ruthlessly sharpened against the grindstone of reality, not bubble-wrapped in a theoretical safe space. Phase 5. Deeply embrace the humiliation of being incorrect. This single step paralyzes the majority of the population. Admitting fault burns. Rewriting your operating system feels like surrendering the high ground and waving the white flag. It absolutely is not. Evolving your stance when presented with devastatingly superior data is the ultimate flex of an elite intellect. It proves your mental hardware is functional, that it adapts, and that it is fully synchronized with reality instead of rotting in a delusional vacuum. Extreme stubbornness clinging to a sinking ship just because jumping off would damage your pride is not a display of power. It is a pathetic defense mechanism. Supreme arrogance is shattered by true confidence. True confidence is grinning when your theory gets dismantled because it means you just leveled up your accuracy. The objective is not to protect your perfect streak. The objective is relentless optimization. Stamp this into the comment section. Being wrong makes me stronger. Let's lock all of these pieces together. You will never uncover reality by trailing behind an influencer. You extract it by commanding your own mental faculties, even if that guarantees you are completely isolated. That isn't some cheap motivational quote. That is the brutal physics of acquiring true mastery. Eventually, every single creator who constructs something of massive magnitude arrives at the exact same cliff edge. The map runs out. There are no cheat codes, no crowd to hide behind, and no templates. They are forced to step into the absolute unknown and bet everything on their own internal compass. That heavy burden of command belongs to you, not your caretakers, not your peer group, not the gurus on your feed. The split second you outsource your logic to a third party, you surrender the steering wheel, and the universe will always extract a heavy toll for that weakness. Reality is never handed out on a silver platter. It must be hunted down and brutally extracted. That requires vicious interrogation, relentless stress testing, and the iron stomach to confess your ignorance and pivot. That is the definition of applied intelligence, not passively hoarding concepts, not nodding along to eloquent speeches, but actually dissecting the mechanics yourself. Before I lay out the final rewards and the ultimate sacrifice of this lifestyle, if this breakdown ignited something visceral inside you, smash that like button and forward it to an ally who is starting to break out of the matrix. And if you haven't joined the ranks yet, hit subscribe. This arena is strictly for those who demand absolute vision and the horsepower to execute on it. Now, let's look at the actual raw of this path. What do you actually extract from becoming a sovereign thinker? First, your vision becomes piercing. You stop seeing the highly sanitized, heavily edited version of the world that the masses digest, and you observe the raw code beneath it. You detect hidden agendas that blindside everyone else. You stop swallowing narratives and start aggressively demanding. Why is the camera angled exactly this way? That X-ray vision upgrades your entire existence, your strategic gambles, your ability to read human behavior, and your total self-awareness. Secondly, your executed moves belong entirely to you. The herd makes choices based on avoiding friction, what keeps the peace, what secures a paycheck, what society applauds. But when you pilot your own ship, your moves are generated by raw data and conviction. They will frequently piss people off, but they are yours. And that forges a titanium-level confidence that doesn't evaporate the moment the crowd begins to boo. Thirdly, you become exceptionally difficult to hack. The vast majority of societal control operates by bypassing logic and striking directly at the nervous system manufacturing panic, creating artificial scarcity, applying heavy social extortion. But when you have mastered the source code of your own mind, those psychological weapons jam. You hold the line. You observe the manipulation attempt from a bird's eye view, and you dictate the counterstrike on your own terms. That is ultimate sovereignty, and as the years compound, you forge an unshakable core. Not because you have an army of yes-men hyping you up, but because you have dragged your philosophies through the mud of reality and watched them survive. That caliber of dominance requires zero external validation. However, the invoice for this power is steep. First, the solitude can be crushing. When you stop functioning as an echo chamber, certain allies will quietly vanish. It won't always be a dramatic screaming match, but the chasm will widen. That pain is authentic. Do not attempt to suppress it. Second, you will inevitably outscale specific circles and habitats. Debates that once completely captivated you will suddenly feel incredibly hollow and pointless. Certain alliances will simply expire. That does not make you a god amongst men. It simply means your operating system has evolved past their hardware. Third, your baseline level of ambiguity will skyrocket. When you trail the herd, there is a pre-packaged answer for every crisis. When you operate autonomously, the most frequent answer you will deploy is, "I haven't gathered enough data to know yet." That feels incredibly vulnerable, but grounded ambiguity is infinitely superior to delusional confidence. And lastly, you bear the total weight of the crown. When your actions are the direct product of your own unfiltered logic, you forfeit the luxury of scapegoating the system when it all burns down. You absorb the entire impact. That is a terrifying burden, but it is the ultimate truth. So no, this trajectory does not offer an easier life. It merely offers a real one. Walk this path in solitude, not out of a petty hatred for humanity, but because you absolutely refuse to lease out your prefrontal cortex. You can still absorb data, study the masters, and build powerful empires with elite operators, but when the clock runs out, the final execution is dictated by you alone. You analyze the variables, you run the simulation, you drop the hammer. That is the daily discipline. Effortless to preach, agonizing to execute. But the return on investment is infinite, because the default path is allowing your reality to be constructed by the entity screaming the loudest, flaunting the most followers, or spinning the most seductive lie. And that guarantees a hollow existence where you are merely a passenger in your own body. Your intellect is the single piece of real estate that is entirely yours. Fortify the walls, upgrade the weaponry, deploy it ruthlessly, and never hand over the keys. If this broadcast completely rewired your perspective, distribute it. Leave your battle scars in the comments below. I analyze all of them. Smash the like button if this delivered actual usable ammunition, and subscribe if you are completely committed to forging a lethal intellect. I will catch you in the next breakdown. Drop your opinion in comment box. Thanks for watching.